we're live to review a pretty recent piece of television. Right then, so I'll start the slideshow off, and oh, just got to turn that down on there. So, Jeff, do you want to go first, or should I?
Well, do you have like some kind of recap of it, or are we just talking?
Right. Okay. Very good of you, Jeff. I'll give you the recap from my memory of it, and I've seen it quite a few times. I like. So you have this man here. I think he's called Pete Jensen, and he goes into to see the psychiatrist, and he's saying early on, I keep having this dream, and it's like, it's so realistic. I actually think I'm going back in time. And in his dream, he wakes up and he finds that he's at the Imperial Hawaiian Hotel, and he's wondering, how did he get there? He was in New York City the day ago. He looks at the date there, sees that it's December. When he went to the last thing he can remember, it was October. He sees the maid on the landing, and she mentions that, and he says something like, "Since when? Here's the Imperial Hawaiian in New York City." And he says, "It's not. It's in Honolulu." And so he's sort of woken up in a hangover, and he asks the maid, "Does this place have a wonderful bar?" And so he goes down to the bar. There's a good line where, and this is where I think he shows some sort of SP traits. Maybe, so for him, I think his best fit type is like ESTP or ESFP. And so when he wants to sit at the bar, but there's no space, but then he says to the guy, well, if the president came in here, there'd be a room enough for him. And then he says, well, I'll take his place. So there's lots of good dialogue in it. There's a nice bit of dialogue with the psychiatrist early on, where it's almost like a little critique of typology. And he says to the guy, "Nothing shakes you up, does it? I can see you coming in, looking at the cut of the flows, taking inventory of the language, sitting back, putting everything I say into pigeonholes. This fits here, this fits there. You think you've got me pegged, don't you?" That kind of stuff. And then he meets this young couple, and there's some confusion over the drink. She accidentally takes his drink. And he says, "Where are you birthed?" And he says, "Oh, I'm in the Arizona." And to him, from 1958, the Arizona? It got sunk at Pearl Harbor. And when did they dredge her up? And then he realizes, and then he sees a newspaper that says Jap envoys to FDR or something like that, or to US. And then he realizes that he's back in time. He grows fond of this couple. He doesn't want this guy to die on the ship. So he's trying to warn them, hey, don't go on there. But they think he's crazy. In this scene here, he goes to the editor of one of the local newspapers in Hawaii, and, Honolulu. And they don't believe him. They get ironic with him. And they'll say things, right, we'll call the president, we'll call the military, and you can lead the charge. And there's a lot of aggression with there, a lot of, I think maybe ESTP stuff. He's quite aggressive, and the barman is quite aggressive as well. And there's one point he's about to reach a bottle. It looks like to whack him. And the young ensign of the ship, the one on the Arizona, sort of stops him. Then we have this scene here, which is that was quite funny when he said "buy bonds," which is a reference to World War II, where they have him with the psychiatrist, this guy with that expression on his face in the foreground with a pencil, he's thinking that he's telling the truth because he mentioned Dwight Eisenhower being president. And he said that he was on the general staff, and he would think, how would he know his name? So then he wakes back up in the psychiatrist's office, or retells the tale, and then he says that the movie ends just right there, just as the airplanes are coming over, the Japanese airplanes, and that's when he wakes up, and then he says something like, "But I feel that the movie, that the dream should have gone on longer." Then what really gets the psychiatrist thinking is that he said that, well, this young ensign, I got his name. It's almost like Janowski or something. And what he did is he found the name in the state, and he got his mother. And he said that the mother told him that both of them had died at Pearl Harbor. So it was like, how could he know that information unless it was true? And so then the psychiatrist is there with him, and he's now laying on the couch, and he's having the dream, and it goes past, and then what he does is, like, to seed the idea in the audience, he then do a little bit of logic, and he says things like, well, how can you go back into the past? Because if you did something, you wouldn't be around now. And I think he has the idea of, and then so psychiatrist does this explanation about changing time. Little things are set up where they were talking for so long, the ashtray was filled with lots of cigarettes, and the lighter of the cigarettes was expended. It was empty. So but then he's watching the guy there. What happens in his dream is he's at the window. It then carries on a bit further, and he's shot by the Japanese airplanes. Then he disappears from the bench. And so because that happens, presumably, what the guy has done is he has shifted into a parallel universe where this guy doesn't exist, but he has the memories of it from that other universe. And when he goes over to the desk, the lighter is still full of fuel, and you've still got cigarette stubs in the ashtray. Then what he does, right at the beginning of the show, he mentioned that he used to tend bar at Andy's. And so he then goes to Andy's for a drink, this bar in New York. And he then, as he's taking a drink, he looks through the glass and he sees a picture of Pete Jensen on the wall. And he said, "Who's that guy in the picture?" Oh, and he said, "Oh, that's Pete Jensen. He used to work here. He died at Pearl Harbor." And that's when he realizes that, oh, this is true. So, Jeff, what do you think of my recap?
That's pretty good, I think.
Probably the best recap I've ever done.
I mean, it's the best recap you've ever done. I actually had, most of those details I remembered. When it came up later, I didn't remember the part about him actually talking about tending bar at the Andy's place. So that one had it confused me slightly because I remembered the earlier scene in the bar, but anyway, I didn't remember he'd said that. So, but I had it accidentally spoiled for me because I was looking. I was confused about like whether it was actually a Twilight Zone episode because of what you'd said. So I was looking up the Westinghouse playlist or whatever it was called, Playhouse.
Yeah.
Just to see that part, and I wasn't reading the plot, but I did stumble over the line that said something about he died at Pearl Harbor, so I knew that was coming, unfortunately. So, I mean, not that it's like a tremendous shock when it happens anyway, because of everything they sort of set up to that point. But William Bendix is the main guy, and plenty of other people probably best know him as the star of Life of Riley, which was originally a radio show in the 40s and then became a TV show in the early 50s, or maybe late 40s, I don't know. And he actually played the lead character in both the radio and the TV version. And so the voice is very familiar to me because even though he's more serious in this, the voice is still very similar. So it's kind of funny actually hearing Chester Riley being this guy. It's hard for me to think of him as somebody else. So it's kind of like if you dropped Riley into this situation, but he probably would have been a little bit. At some point, he would have said, "What a revolting development this is." So, and he never did. But you said something earlier about like what elements are like the Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
It was not as weird as I know a lot of Twilight Zones were later. Like there's not as many like just odd moments and stuff like that. It's very kind of straightforward in its presentation, even in trying to kind of be like there's this other dimensional quality, but it's still very, for lack of a better term, it's very censor friendly. In that there's not like a bunch of a bunch of theoretical concepts really discussed at length or anything like that. It's very much like if you either accept the concept there can be like time travel or dimensional travel or whatever, or you don't. And even if you don't, you can still understand what happens in the story. So, but if you do, then obviously it adds a certain cool element to it. But I held my attention the entire time. It wasn't. I didn't find it boring or off-putting in any particular way. There were a few things I chuckled at, some of the dialogue and situations like the fact that they pretty much set up as far as anyone knew in the bar in Hawaii, he was just some rambling drunk guy. So the fact that there's points where everybody in the bar is like just sitting in attention, listening to everything he says, was a little bit funny because I'm like, they might have done when he first like ran into the jukebox or whatever, because it was kind of commotion. People might have made it, but then as soon as he started just kind of rambling about what's going to happen in the future, you figure most people probably would have just turned around and gone back to their drink and not really paid attention to what he was saying. But
yeah, I think if it were. What I always found was brilliant about the Twilight Zone, the few episodes that I've seen, is they get right what I think the new Doctor Who gets wrong, and that is tone. The only thing of this where the tone was slightly off, and that was probably because of the time it was made, is just when he woke up and had that little jokey music. I didn't like that. I think that in terms of William Bendix's, is that his first name, William Bendix?
That's his first and last name.
Right. Okay. Very good, Jeff. I was thinking that as an actor, when it got to the really emotional moments, we saw his limitations as an actor. So it's like he couldn't like quite play those acting notes. But when he was like doing the quick talking and the aggression, I thought that was very good. What did you think of his performance?
I thought it was good. Everybody, to me, when it comes to acting performances, it's there's some that are just like off the chart stellar, where you're like, oh, this was spectacular. But then the overwhelming majority, it's just, did I accept these people as their characters? Was there any point at which they seemed to be out of character, or they didn't seem to, weren't believable in the part? And I didn't feel like anybody in this was ever not believable as who they were playing. So I didn't, thought all the performances were good for what they were.
Do you think there were like a lot of? It's almost like there seemed to be like 3 ESTPs in this.
I don't know. I didn't really get enough personality from any of the characters to type them, really. And there wasn't enough information really to do that. I mean, you can make certain guesses about things. Usually, what we've said this before when it comes to types is like, often it's sort of a game, elimination game. You can figure out types somebody isn't before you can figure out the one that they actually are.
Yeah.
So Morgan's voice raining down from above said, "Why do you think the main guy is an ESTP when he's always choked up about everything all the time?"
Oh, I was just going off his ability to be assertive and his aggression. And that I was also thinking for him, either ESTP or ESFP. I was just sort of going by his assertiveness. And that guy's pretty assertive as well, the barman.
Well, that was, it was kind of interesting to me that they didn't have him, like, I wouldn't say it's a case for ESTP necessarily, but I would say he's probably not an idealist.
Yes.
Because they didn't have him as, like, he was the do-gooder in terms of once he found out what was going on, he somehow thought it was his mission to save everybody from this attack. Like, he was trying to warn people, but it wasn't in, like, even in what he said to the psychiatrist, he didn't say, like, I was put here to try to stop this from happening or something, or to, so it didn't really seem like he was taking it that way. Whereas it with NFs that kind of tend to have that thing where it's like the burden, the whole world's on their shoulders, or like they have to do this. And at one point, like he was trying to see how much money he could make off the deal by making all these bets that he was going to supposedly cash in on. So stupid. So there was a certain amount of pragmatism there, but in general, it was like tough to really say because he was kind of mixed up by the situation. So, Morgan said his personality type was old school television character. So,
yeah, but I think it's certainly the way I would say for him, okay, a sensing type. Smart, seemed to show some certainly assertive.
Yes, his type is not bump on a log, because if he was, then he wouldn't have cared about any of this stuff. He would have just, meandered about his life, and instead he felt like he had to say something to people and take some sort of action. He just was not very sure about what that should be.
Yeah.
Which ultimately was what led to his downfall, because he didn't accurately think or didn't sufficiently think about what would happen to him, even in a dream state, I guess.
Yeah.
As far as like, there's airplane bombers attacking, let me go to the window, But I have just, because I've got to have at least one stupid question per thing for me, because I just didn't know that. Was Pearl Harbor actually close to Honolulu?
Ooh.
Because that's the one thing, like a couple of things that I thought of, that were slightly unrealistic about the setting. For the most part, I thought of it, but that was the one thing that I just don't know, because I didn't think it was right next to Honolulu, but maybe I'm wrong. So you could buy that, the sailor might have been in Honolulu because there's more bars there before he went to the ship that was at Pearl Harbor. But if it would be the part where he gets shot by the planes might have been less realistic, because I don't think they were just throwing shots before they got to the military. That's one reason they were able to be as successful as they were, the Japanese, I mean, is that they didn't give it away until they actually got to their targets, or close
Yeah.
enough to their targets. They weren't just spraying all of Hawaii with bullets everywhere.
I think that was an example, Pearl Harbor, of winning the battle and losing the war straight away.
Well, yeah. That would pretty much be factually true, yes.
Yes, because that is ridiculous. I mean, the Japanese were crazy racist at the time. The Japanese, or even against other East Asians, especially the Chinese. But what have we got?
Well, I mean, even the emperor at the time was against it. He didn't think they should do that. So.
Oh yeah, I mean that's what I think. At one point, he said, "You might be under the impression that I'm ruling this country, but no, it's the military." Oh yeah, he mentioned something about the you know when they asked him at the beginning about his like professions, they seem to be quite SPy, like we were saying, like part-time bookie and all of these other things, the sort of things that maybe an ESTJ wouldn't do unless they'd like grown up in that as like a culture. Maybe an ESTJ might do that if like their father had done it or something. But I mean, that guy there, the barman, I thought he was quite aggressive. What was William Bendix like when he played his other roles? Was he like, did he have like that assertiveness about him, or was he sort of different? Because I'm wondering how much is him as an actor and how much is the part.
It's funny because I mentioned knowing him from Life of Riley, but it's been a couple of years probably since I've listened to any of it. It was pretty typical sitcom in a lot of ways, where it was like he gets into, gets himself into situations and has to try to get himself out of it, So in some ways it was similar, I guess, to the Honeymooners, except that, on that it was like mainly,
Right.
It had sort of more of a duo, whereas Riley, it was like he had other people he played off of, but a lot of times it was kind of just him and, his wife and kids, and people at work, his boss and stuff. But I don't know. I actually think Riley was probably a guardian. He just was not a very smart one. So he would get into situations, and have to figure his way out of them. But they were always based on him trying to either make money or improve his work situation or his status in some way. So
Right.
they weren't like, I'm just going to have these spontaneous things that I feel like are fun. Like he didn't have a lot of fun. Like his life was very like weighing on him most of the time. So he was like, I got to do something so I can get out of this dead-end job and make more money, or I need to help, I need to get more stuff for my family. So it was like, I would say almost he seemed more like an ISTJ kind of type of character that was like, I want to give my family the comforts of life kind of thing, but he doesn't quite know how to do it. So he would try some kind of get-rich-quick scheme or something that he thought would help him do that, and then he would always screw it up and have to figure out how to fix what happened.
I imagine that character, the way you described him, would be so relatable for the audience.
Oh,
and would have been very popular.
Yeah, especially at that time. I think it was probably, it was the post-World War II period where there was obviously a lot of people that were thankful to have jobs, period, and there wasn't a lot of room for advancement. It was just sort of, this is the situation I'm in and I have to deal with it kind of thing.
Yeah, because there was a big recession after World War II as industry had to reorganize, going from war production to domestic production. It was.
I would say that he ages well because in both looks and voice, he sounds almost exactly the same as he did in the 40s, and this was 58, I guess, so.
Yeah.
So even though I think, if I remember right, he actually died in the 60s, so he didn't live that much longer, but he still looked like he aged well in terms of he didn't seem like he was that much older.
Yeah, I mean, when I mention the aggression part, it's like how much of that is like the culture, because it's like that the guy behind the bar seemed to be that sort of New York attitude
Yeah,
as
I don't
well.
know. That's there's some of those cultural things where my only exposure to it is old TV and radio kind of media. So I don't know. There were times as a kid I asked my mom things about it because I wondered, when I'd see old movies and I'd say, "Do people really talk like that?" Because and she would say, "Well, do people in today's movies talk like?" And I would be like, "Well, I guess that's kind of a good answer because I'm like, well, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, because there's you know when I say current as like at the time, like 80s movies, be like there's some characters that are relatable and pretty much talk like normal people do, and then there's other ones where they're always over the top and not sounding like real people. So it kind of depends.
One of the
So
things,
that
yeah.
it's harder for me to judge whether a bartender in a random Honolulu bar would have acted the way that guy did or not. Maybe he would. I don't know.
When you look at like Kurz's words for SPs, does he sound a bit like that guy? Because this is like Kurz's era, isn't it? The 50s. I mean, he was in his late 30s when this was made.
Well, I don't know, not necessarily, because I mean, he does stress SP's liking to have fun and do things for pleasure, and that doesn't. It's not always about like being aggressive. So.
I don't know. I wasn't sort of meaning that. I was just like just like the way. I just wondered if, as you said, the way they talk. I
Oh,
just
you just
wondered
mean
if,
the dialogue the
yeah, the
SJs
dialogue
use?
and like how Kurzy.
Yeah, yeah. That's again, it's hard to tell on that because it's one of those things where um, you know, the Guardians tend to start using the dialogue that the artisans did just later after it's
Yes.
old enough to become acceptable and comfortable for them to use it.
Yeah. Do you think so? These days, how long do you think the delay is between SPs and SJs?
I
About
don't
10
know. I
years?
estimated 5 years a while back because of a particular ISTJ coworker I have that seemed like he would always be quoting the trends from 5 years before, but that was just an estimate. And maybe with all the so-called social media and stuff like that today, it may have quickened because it doesn't take as much time for things to be disseminated.
Ah, yeah, I see what you mean because it would be the SPs with the SPs using the language, whereas I think you said that the SJs like to watch the SPS on television.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they keep them in business basically because one of SJ's favorite things to do is scolding SPs for how badly they're acting. So in order for them to be able to do that, they have to actually see it.
Yeah.
so so they enjoy watching that and then talking about how bad they are.
Yeah. I mean, what would they do if it was? Um. So yeah, because I was thinking about something like this as like Kersey's types. Like I wondered if they might be more noticeable something from this era, especially when he's talking about the sensing types. I think that he got more up to date with like the NTs because like he was in a world of NTs, and so especially with his son as well. That's why I think that his profiles of the NTs are just so good. Uh, what else?
Yeah, see, I don't think he was an ESFP because he never like hit on the chick and she was pretty hot, so
Yeah.
that was my primary concern at the time. So
Yeah, that might be Enneagram sexual. Because what I was trying to think is I was trying not to be stereotypical and sort of reason like this is like, oh, he cares for that couple, therefore he can't be ESTP. I'm thinking,
because
no, ESTPs can care.
maybe this just says something bad about my morals or whatever, but my thought was thinking, hey, your husband's going to die tomorrow,
But
But I didn't
think,
know that was it there. It said that she was going to also, so that kind of took that out. But like maybe you think, hey, maybe I need to take you to a safe place, and so you'll still be around.
I think so. I think maybe if you were playing that part, right, and obviously you've got the script in front of you, you would maybe play you being attracted to her, but then sort of like hiding it a little bit. You might have that as a little bit of subtext.
Yeah,
Because
I'm thinking maybe in '58, I don't know exactly, but I'm thinking that kind of the cultural standards at the time, it would have thrown the whole thing off to have him express anything that seemed like he was doing that because a couple of reasons, not only because she was married, but also like the age difference would have
yeah,
been, you know, frowned upon or whatever in that way. So I think it might, the reason they wouldn't have wanted to have that element was that they were focusing on, like I said, it was really a very straightforward story. And I don't think they wanted something that would distract from this guy is supposed to be um, not really the hero, quote unquote, but the audience is supposed to be on his side in the
yeah,
sense that, they didn't want to put anything in there, I think, that would make him, um, lose favor with the
yeah. You're
audience.
right. Yeah,
And
I
that
think
could have done that.
I think you're right there. So it's like typical fault of me, and maybe the MPs in general, trying to cram too much in there, losing focus.
Yeah, well, and that's what I would say is a credit to this story is that they don't do that. It's not convoluted at all. Like I said, it's very straightforward. It's just a matter of whether you accept the general premise and, just enjoy it for what it is. And I felt like I did. So it's not something that was like, spectacular, blow me away in either way, either just for, being like this it's not like an overly emotional story in terms of I don't really get into the emotions of the characters that much, but I also don't, and there's nothing that like from a concept point of view, there's not like this super cool thing that like makes my eyes water with the amazing and blown away by this kind of feeling either. So it doesn't have that level of entertainment, but it's entertaining for what it is. So there's not like a lot of faults in it, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of concepts, I always like trying to put something in its era, and think that it's like, well, because other science fiction things or fantasy things have done similar things.
Yeah, that's
It's
always
like,
really tough, and that's part of the problem I had with reviewing the old Doctor Who stories was because when I would come across a concept that to me was kind of old hat and that I'd seen so many things with that, I had to stop and think, well, wait a minute, was it really, had this been done before Doctor Who? Because maybe Doctor Who was the first. Sometimes they might have been. So that's the thing is, it's hard for me to put myself in that position where I haven't seen anything that had that kind of like Doctor Who did several stories about the concept of like computers or robots, things that have been created by humans, like sort of rebelling and taking over the humans kind of thing.
yeah, like War Machines.
And
Yeah,
right. And when I reviewed the War Machines, I kind of felt like I've seen this before, even though I hadn't. Um, but the problem is with that, like I said, I don't know how many stories of that concept had been done. Probably not very many because computers were still very new at that time. So um, it probably was a lot more contemporary in that sense, and it's hard for me to put myself in that
yeah.
place.
And in fact, you had a point. I think up to about 20 years ago, I think a lot of the NTs were getting jaded and thinking, look, we're never going to have robots. Robots have been predicted for decades. Where are the robots? And now they're just starting to come in.
Yeah, and for us as kids, it was always, it was because of space exploration. There was always the idea that we were going to be much further when it came to space travel. By this time, we were going to have colonies on the moon and manned missions to Mars and things like that. And obviously, our advances went in a different direction
Yeah, I mean, it's like every
because
State of the Union is like, we're going to go to Mars.
we don't have moon colonies,
Yeah.
but we have all this digital on-demand technology that nobody in the '60s could have like ever imagined.
Yeah, I
So
mean, it's like the entertainment stuff. Yeah.
right.
Um. So talking about those elements, and I think that Twilight Zone is very good at being focused, and then it has a sort of and their twists would tend to be creepy twists, where the twist wasn't too much that it became unbelievable.
Yeah, sometimes there was only one line at the very end of the episode that would be like, that's why it would always be the thing that just hits you at the very end.
Yep.
Because in the case of this, which, you know, I guess reiterate for the audience, is not actually a Twilight Zone episode. It's written by Rod Serling, and it was what led to him being given the chance to produce Twilight Zone.
Even the music's Twilight Zone-ish. So,
yeah, but anyway, a lot of times I remember with Twilight Zone episodes, it would just be one line at the very end that would be the twist. So you had no time basically to figure it out. There wasn't like this, you know, even the amount of time in this, where you have a couple of minutes at the end to kind of, you know, even the part where once he disappears from the couch at the psychiatrist, then you kind of had this idea of this is what happened, and it's just a matter of him confirming it when he goes to the bar. Whereas in some Twilight Zone episodes, you had ones where there was literally no time at all besides just the last line of the show and then the credits. It was like you're left with thinking about this as the credits are rolling, like, wait a minute, what just happened, you know?
I think that, you like Back to the Future Part 2 as well. I just think I'm giving the plot NT points for getting the time travel aspect right. And I think they explained it well, just on that idea of the time travel. This idea of when you change time, you then go into like a different universe. And lots of YouTube videos by NTs have said that. I
see what you're saying.
Yeah, that Back to the Future got it. Back to the Future Part 2 got it exactly right.
Yeah, well, and I've always said, you know, again, obviously it's all theoretical, but, you know, my feeling was the reason that time travel won't be possible is for that very thing, is that that time is not something you can go back to, because it's not just this line that stays the same.
Yeah.
You know, that it's basically like by life happening, the things that have changed the old framework of time, so it's not there for you to go back to anymore. Is the way I've always viewed it.
I think Doctor Who had a good story where they showed this world. That was Day of the Daleks, where you saw this parallel universe where the Daleks were in charge because of an event that happened.
That story was just such a letdown.
Yeah.
That was the first time that, you know, I guess watching, that's one of those stories that maybe is better when you don't watch it in context, because if you watch in the context of the overall show,
yeah,
it's been like 5 years since the Daleks have been on there, and that's their return, and it's just such a lame return for them that it's...
Was it the first one the Daleks were in colour, and they didn't update the Daleks, and they looked really old and shabby because suddenly it went...
Yeah, just everything about it was just poorly done. You know, it really... I'm actually surprised because of that they brought the Daleks back as quickly as they did, but I guess it was sort of like they were trying to apologize for it. No, we really can do more with them. So basically when they brought them back again, they did Planet of the Daleks, where it was, they pretty much rehashed the original Dalek story, just updated some things, but it was very much a callback to that. You know,
I think the characterization was a little bit better in with the Thals in Planet of the Daleks. One of the things about what was interesting is when they went into colour in England, and they went from, I think they went from 405 lines to 625 lines. They actually called that high definition at the time. And I think in the United States, they went from about, I know they went to 525 lines. So.
Yeah, that was a nice touch. Whoever was, you know, that produced this video, that they made the CBS television distribution thing at the end also in black and white, just to keep in with the consistency.
Yeah, because what happened was it had been lost for a number of decades, and it was rediscovered. And One thing I remember,
Yeah.
yeah,
I was just talking about that final like little logo thing that's not
yeah.
from the original. It's the new thing, but they kept it in black and white too. They produced it or changed removed the color from that's normally on there.
Yeah, I'll just show it for people. Here we go. There's the old CBS, and then it goes into the new one.
Yeah.
So what I was thinking, what was I going to say about this? It was lost. 1958. What was I going to say about? Oh, it's gone.
Of course, Desilu Productions is Desi Arnaz and Lucille Ball production company.
I did not know that. Now they did mention the Ricardo at the end.
Their names.
Ah, right, because they did mention. They at the end. It's like they gave a preview for the. They said the Ricardos and Lucy Ball, because they sort of mentioned this at the end of the show. I did not know that. Were they involved with Star Trek, Desilu?
I don't know. Not that I know of.
There you go. Westinghouse Desilu Playhouse. Yeah.
I
don't know
what was the host that spoke at the beginning.
Ah, this guy with the weird voice.
You've just insulted all Cubans. No, I think he probably would have admitted he had a weird voice too.
It's little
he had a little bit of a lisp, I think. But anyway.
So this music that they played here, that was quite Twilight Zone-esque. It's just the music I didn't like was this bit when he was waking up and he had that sort of like comedy music. It just sort of like,
I don't know. I guess they felt like they had to have something like that to ease people into it. Couldn't be too intense or people would tune out.
Yeah.
Plus, William Bendix was known as a comedic actor, so maybe they had to, had to ease people into accepting him as a serious character.
Yeah, she was quite good as well.
I've never. That's another thing that may just be different, either from the time or just the location. But I've never known a hotel maid to be that talkative with the guest.
Well, he was sort of like pressuring her a bit.
Well, yeah. Either way, I mean, but of course, I not being in other people's hotel rooms, I have no idea if other people strike up conversations with the maids because I've never done it myself, so I wouldn't know.
Well, maybe if it's like ESFJ, it's like they can't stop themselves. they want to have a conversation with people. So yeah, I thought the plot was tight the way they did it. I thought it was nice and tight and integrated, and everything sort of went. All of the elements were sort of all pointing in the same direction, so it was all integrated. And so, what Pat Patterson would call it, like saying a song, where prosody, where all of the elements are integrated towards one thing, rather than what. I think what the new Doctor Who does is they put little bits in that compromise the tone of the overall thing, rather than just. And as you said, how do you think they made it censor friendly? And then we can sort of finish on that bit.
Well, like I said, I mean, it's more because the story is straightforward. It's easy to follow. It's not loaded with a bunch of like heavy conceptual stuff. It's not trying to. It's not using a bunch of convoluted jargon or
right.
Some of the sci-fi stuff, they either try to load too much of that or they like almost try to cover up the fact they don't really have any actual science by just having a bunch of gobbledygook words to try to make them sound more sophisticated than they are. And they didn't do anything like that. It was very much, you could tell that, when I guess Rod Serling wrote this as trying to be something that would be mass appeal that people would relate to, understand the concepts, understand the basic human drama of it, as opposed to trying to make it about a bunch of odd stuff.
Right. That's what I remembered now what I was going to say. So I used to read these magazines, and so basically a lot of these science fiction audience or writers in the 1990s, they would always talk about how much they loved the Twilight Zone. And in terms of what Jeff said there about making it censor friendly and not, there's no point doing science fiction for science fiction's sake. And that was the guy that redid Battlestar Galactica, Ron Moore. He worked on Star Trek for over 10 years. And then when he did Battlestar Galactica, he wanted to make it completely opposite and just much more down to earth, and where people could watch it almost as if they're watching a documentary on an American aircraft carrier. And he wanted to keep the science to a minimum. Right then. Unlike Star Trek, it was almost written for ends.
Yeah, Star Trek was very weird from the beginning. And the funny thing is, that's still toned down from what Gene Roddenberry wanted it to be. The original pilot is much weirder, and then they made him tone down that for a way. So they kept on like censoring Gene Roddenberry's ideas in terms of wanting, what he wanted it to be. So the actual produced Star Trek series is very much a bunch of compromises between Roddenberry and the network people.
So what I'll do is I'll finish up by saying, so in the pilot of Star Trek, he had the first officer as a female. Mm-hmm. And then that was toned down. And
Spock is much more emotional. So if you want to see emo Spock, he's not that much more, but he is. He definitely shows more enthusiasm and even smiles, which is kind of creepy to see Spock smiling.
Right then, so I think this review ended up okay. What'd you give it out of 10, Jeff?
Well, as I said, it's not spectacular, but it holds my attention to the whole thing, and it's interesting, and it's enough. So I give it a 7. That's kind of my average score for something that's entertaining and interesting enough for me to want to watch it and overall feel like is good, but not like there's nothing that like really blows me away in it.
Do you think it would have been better if it had been cut down to about 27 minutes?
Yeah, maybe, but I never really got the feeling that it dragged very much. So I honestly, like, maybe they could have cut a few minutes, but maybe not that much.
Yeah, and it also gives you an idea of just how much more adverts there are these days when you look at the length of the recording.
Yeah,
and you see it gets shorter and shorter and shorter. It's like when you look at the Blake Sevens, they're like 48 minutes. And then by the time we got to the 1990s with Star Trek, when you see the DVDs, it's like 44 minutes. And then it became like 42, and now it's about 40.
Yeah.
Right then. So I will stop recording now. So I'll give it...
You didn't give your score.
Oh, yeah, I'll give it... I'm going to give it about... I think I'm going to give it an 8. I'm giving it NT points for getting the time travel stuff right.
Okay.
And a great ending. A nice, solid, nice, well done, well crafted ending. Okay. Even though I knew what was coming, and I liked the characterization of Pete Jensen. Okay. That's a lead character played by William Bendix. So I will stop now.